Stop scrolling right now. If you drive in Australia, what I'm about to tell you could literally save lives and save you from massive fines, losing your license, or even criminal charges. Come December 2025 EVANG, and if you don't understand these new rules, you could be putting yourself and others in serious danger. Stay with me because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to do when sirens are coming, how to avoid penalties, and why one small mistake could cost someone their life. Don't blink. This affects every driver in the country. Hey, if you want to stay ahead of all these life-saving updates and never miss what I upload first on topics like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. This channel is made just for people like you, and I promise I'll keep bringing the most important updates first, including this very topic. So subscribing is the easiest way to stay informed and safe. Go on, hit subscribe, you won't regret it. GA Day everyone, and welcome to what might be one of the most important traffic safety updates you'll hear all year. If you're driving anywhere in Australia, you need to pay close attention to what I am about to share with you because come December 2025, there are some absolutely critical changes happening to how we're all required to respond when emergency vehicles are around. These aren't just minor tweaks to the existing rules, mate. We're talking about a complete overhaul of the emergency vehicle protocols that's going to affect every single driver on Australian roads, from the bustling streets of Sydney and Melbourne right through to the quiet country roads in regional areas. Whether you're a brand new PE plater or you've been driving for decades, these changes are going to impact you directly. And trust me, you don't want to be caught out not knowing what you're supposed to do. Now, before we dive into the nitty-gritty details of what's actually changing, let's take a moment to understand why these new rules are being brought in. Over the past few years, there's been a really worrying trend across the country where emergency response times have been getting slower and slower, and unfortunately, this has had some pretty serious consequences. Ambulances are taking longer to reach people who desperately need medical help. Fire trucks are being delayed, getting to properties that are going up in flames, and police vehicles are struggling to respond quickly to urgent situations. The data that transport authorities have been collecting shows that one of the biggest contributing factors to these delays is that everyday drivers simply aren't moving out of the way fast enough, or in some cases aren't moving at all when emergency vehicles are trying to get through. And it's not always because people are being deliberately difficult. Often it's just confusion about what they're supposed to do or panic in the moment. Or maybe they just haven't been keeping up with their road rules knowledge since they got their license years ago. So here's what's changing, and this is where you really need to pay attention. From December 2025, when you see or hear an emergency vehicle approaching with its lights flashing or sirens wailing, and I'm talking about ambulances, fire trucks, police cars, or any other authorized emergency vehicle, you're going to be legally required to take immediate action to clear a path. Now I know what you're thinking, but we already have to do that, don't we? And you'd be right. We do have existing rules about this, but the new legislation is much more specific and much more strict about exactly what clearing a path actually means, and the penalties for getting it wrong are going to be significantly heavier than they are right now. Let me break down the specific requirements that you'll need to follow under these new rules. First up, if you're driving on a multi-lane road, so that's any road with 2 or more lanes going in your direction, when an emergency vehicle approaches from behind with its sirens on, you must immediately and safely move to the left-hand side of the road. Notice I said safely. There you still need to check your mirrors and blind spots, and you can't just swerve dangerously into another lane without looking. But the key word here is immediately. You can't just wait until it's super convenient for you or until you reach the next set of traffic lights. As soon as it's safe to do so, you need to be moving left. If you're already in the left-hand lane, you might need to slow down or even pull over to the curb if that's what's required to let the emergency vehicle pass. The important thing is that you're actively creating space for that vehicle to get through the traffic as quickly as possible. Now, here's where it gets a bit more interesting and where a lot of drivers might get caught out if they're not paying attention. The new rules also address what you need to do at traffic lights. And this is probably one of the biggest changes from how things currently work. Under the new legislation, if you're stopped at a red light and an emergency vehicle approaches from behind with its sirens going, you are now permitted and in some cases required to carefully proceed through that red light if it's the only way to clear a path for the emergency vehicle. Let me say that again because it's really important. You may need to go through a red light. Obviously, you need to make absolutely certain that it's safe to do so. You need to check that there's no traffic coming from the other directions, no pedestrians in the crossing, and that you're not going to cause an accident by moving forward. But if the intersection is clear and the only way to let that emergency vehicle through is for you to move forward through the red light, then that's what you need to do. And here's the crucial part. you won't be fined or penalized for going through that red light in those circumstances, as long as you can demonstrate that you did it safely and only because an emergency vehicle required you to move. But wait, there's more to the traffic light situation. The new rules also specify that if you're approaching an intersection and you can see or hear an emergency vehicle coming from any direction, you should not enter that intersection even if your light is green. You need to slow down, assess the situation, and make sure you're not going to block the path of that emergency vehicle. This might mean stopping before you enter the intersection, even though you've got a green light, which I know might feel a bit weird at first, but it's all about making sure those emergency crews can get where they need to go without any obstacles in their way. Now let's talk about what happens if you're on a single-lane road where there's only one lane in each direction. The rules for this scenario are pretty straightforward, but still really important. When an emergency vehicle approaches from behind, you need to pull over to the left side of the road and slow down or stop if necessary. If you're on a narrow street where there's not really enough room for two vehicles to pass side by side, you might need to pull over completely onto the shoulder or even into a driveway if that's what it takes to let the emergency vehicle get past. And if you're going around a bend or over a hill where visibility is limited, you need to be extra cautious and make sure you're well clear of the road so the emergency vehicle can get through safely without having to worry about oncoming traffic. Here's something else that's going to be different under the new rules: the penalties for not complying. Currently, if you fail to give way to an emergency vehicle, you might cop a fine and lose a few demerit points, but the amounts vary quite a bit between different states and territories. From December 2025, the penalties are being standardised across the entire country, and they're being significantly increased. We're looking at fines in the range of several hundred. Some reports are suggesting it could be up to $500 or $600 in some cases, and you'll be losing a substantial number of demerit points from your license. For drivers who are already close to losing their license because of accumulated points, this could be the offense that pushes them over the edge and results in a suspension. And if your failure to give way to an emergency vehicle results in an accident or further delays the emergency response, you could be looking at even more serious charges, including dangerous driving offenses. But it's not just about avoiding fines and penalties, is it? Let's think about the bigger picture here for a moment. When an ambulance is trying to get to someone who's having a heart attack or a serious accident, every single second counts. Studies have shown that for someone in cardiac arrest, their chances of survival drop by about 10% for every minute that passes without proper medical attention. So, if a driver's failure to move out of the way delays an ambulance by even just 2 or 3 minutes, that could literally be the difference between life and death for the person who needs help. The same goes for fire trucks. A house fire can double in size every minute, so those delays could mean the difference between saving someone's home and watching it burn to the ground. When you think about it like that, these new rules aren't just about following the law. They're about being a responsible member of the community and doing your part to help save lives. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, but what if I can't safely move out of the way? What if I'm boxed in by other traffic or there's nowhere for me to go? The new legislation does account for these situations. You're not expected to do anything dangerous or illegal that would put yourself or others at risk. If you genuinely cannot move because you're completely hemmed in by other vehicles or because moving would cause an accident, then you won't be penalized for staying where you are. However, and this is important, you need to be making a reasonable effort to create space wherever possible. So, even if you can't completely clear the lane, maybe you can edge over a little bit to help widen the gap. Maybe you can slow down to let other vehicles move ahead so there's more room. The key is that authorities will be looking at whether you made a genuine attempt to help the emergency vehicle get through, not whether you achieved perfect clearance. There's also some important stuff about what you should do after an emergency vehicle has passed you. Under the new rules, you can't just immediately pull back into your original lane or position and carry on at full speed. You need to wait until the emergency vehicle is well clear. We're talking at least 100 meters or so before you resume your normal driving. This is partly for safety reasons because there might be multiple emergency vehicles responding to the same incident and you don't want to pull back out into the path of a second ambulance or police car that's following a few seconds behind the first one. It's also to prevent situations where drivers aggressively try to overtake the emergency vehicle or cut back in front of it, which unfortunately does happen from time to time. Let's talk about some specific scenarios that often confuse people and how the new rules will apply to them. What about roundabouts? If you're on a roundabout and an emergency vehicle approaches, the general rule is that you should exit the roundabout as quickly and safely as possible, then pull over to the left to let the emergency vehicle through. Don't stop in the middle of the roundabout. That'll just create more problems. What about if you're in a car park or a driveway when you hear sirens? You should avoid entering the roadway until the emergency vehicle has passed. Don't pull out into traffic and then try to immediately move over. That just creates unnecessary complications. Wait until the road is clear, then proceed normally. Here's another scenario that comes up a lot. What if you're in the right-hand lane because you're about to turn right and an emergency vehicle approaches? You still need to move left if that's possible. Even if it means you'll miss your turn can wait, the emergency can't. Obviously, don't cut across multiple lanes unsafely, but if you can safely move to the left, do it. And then you can circle back to make your turn once the emergency vehicle has passed. It's also worth noting that these new rules apply regardless of whether the emergency vehicle is directly behind you or in another lane. If you can see or hear an emergency vehicle anywhere in your vicinity, you need to be preparing to take action. Don't assume that because it's in a different lane or on the other side of the road that it won't affect you. Emergency vehicles often need to weave between lanes or even use the wrong side of the road to get through heavy traffic, so you need to be ready to respond no matter where you are. So, what should you be doing to prepare for these changes? First and foremost, make sure you're familiar with the new rules before they come into effect in December 2025. Don't wait until you're in a situation where an emergency vehicle is bearing down on you with sirens blaring to try to figure out what you're supposed to do. Read up on the legislation, watch some educational videos if they're available, and maybe even practice the maneuvers in a safe environment so you know exactly what to do when the time comes. Talk to your family members and friends about the changes, especially if you've got young drivers in your household who might not be as experienced with handling these situations. It's also a good idea to stay calm and alert whenever you're driving. A lot of people panic when they hear sirens, and that panic can lead to poor decision. If you're alert and aware of your surroundings, you'll be much better equipped to respond appropriately when an emergency vehicle approaches. Keep your music at a reasonable volume so you can hear sirens. Regularly check your mirrors so you're aware of what's happening around you, and always be thinking a few steps ahead about what you would do if an emergency vehicle suddenly appeared. In conclusion, these new emergency vehicle rules coming into effect in December 2025 represent a really significant change in how we're expected to behave as drivers on Australian roads. They're being introduced because emergency response times are critical and every second saved could literally save a life. The rules are more specific, more strict, and carry heavier penalties than what we've had before, but they're also pretty logical and straightforward once you understand them. Move left when it's safe. Create space for emergency vehicles. Be prepared to stop or even proceed through red lights if necessary, and always prioritize the emergency vehicle's ability to get through traffic quickly and safely. These aren't unreasonable expectations. They're just asking us all to be more aware, more responsive, and more considerate when there's an emergency happening. So, take the time to learn these new rules, practice them, and most importantly, follow them when the time comes. It could make all the difference to someone who's having the worst day of their life and desperately needs help. Stay safe out there, Australia, and let's all do our part to help our emergency services do their incredibly important jobs. Cheers and drive safely.